career path, building an identity as a PhD candidate. Today we're here with Sam Fready from the University of Wollongong. He is doing a PhD there, and it's a privilege for me to have him today with us today. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Thank you, Park. The privilege is all mine. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
Thank you, and thank you for being back here again. So, I noticed that we have met many times at a conference and at some industry function and all that. So you actually have been doing a lot on your social media and also practical session and all. I think you would be a good person to talk about how a PhD candidate can build their identity and build their brand image and all that. So first of all, what would be the advice that you'd like to give to other PhD candidates about building a network or building a brand identity for themselves?
Right. And that's a great question to start off with, Park. Thank you. I would like to combine strong academic and professional identity into one term, which is personal brand. And I think within your personal brand, it all begins to fit in and play out both your academic and your professional identity. And the first advice, if I can, that I'd like to point out is don't underestimate the power of your personal brand. I think this is something that's often overlooked, but is a crucial element. Interestingly enough, I just finished subject coordinating Mark 233 at my university, which is a digital marketing subject. And assessment three is building a personal brand. And a part of that assessment is reflection, where the students reflect on the entire process. And I've heard so many students talking about the fact that after they've gone through the personal branding exercise, they come to a realization how important it is to build your personal brand and to be proactive about it. So that brings me to my second point, which is so first point was don't underestimate the power of a personal brand, and two, be proactive about it because whether you like it or not, it's constantly being formed. And if it is constantly being formed, then rather you take proactive steps into uh, guiding that process of building your own personal brand. So where you're taking charge, and of course, you're ensuring that your personal brand, which is your academic and professional identity, align with your values, align with your research interests, align with who you are. That's the space where you get to talk about your unique contributions, where you want to end up in terms of a career. So the two pieces of advice: one, don't underestimate personal brands and what you can do with it, and two, be proactive about it and take charge. Don't let the river run its course, so as to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the section where you're saying for your personal brand, if you not make any decision, if you not do anything, I mean, it will constantly build the personal brand for you anyway. Like someone will think about you in a certain way and all that. Now, what would be an example of good personal brand for a current PhD candidate?
I think that's a great question, and it boils down to exactly what you said, Park, without getting into branding literature, so as to speak. When I think of a person, what do I think of them? What are the inferences that I can draw about them, say, from their social presence, for example? What are my impressions of them from having conversed with them? And this is where I believe the closer your personal brand is true to being who you really are, the more effective it is. And going back to the point where we said, if we are not conscious about it, we're still building it anyway. Each of us are building our own personal brands. And if we are conscious and proactive about it, we can really curate some of those brand experiences, so as to speak. So, what I post on social media, for example, or even simple things like the way I dress up, the way I speak, the events that I'm a part of, or the groups that I'm a part of, all of that then begin to build into what that professional or personal brand for you looks like. So, really, the question is, who are you and where do you want to be? And is your personal brand that you put out there in the world aligned with those things?
Yes, yes. You have touched on social media. You have touched on the PhD group that you have created or co-created, and you have 50 members that build on from the NSMAC, Dr. Colloquium. You have touched on the personal brand on a few things. Now, do you have any strategy in terms of make building a personal network or professional network that is meaningful? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. And like you rightly pointed out, Park, think conferences, research communities, and ANSMAC is a great example. Within my university, we've just recently, so I'm also co-hosting within my university the HDR AI communities of practice. So that's a research community of practice focused on implications of AI for HDR students. And I think these communities or these research communities and conferences have been key in my journey of building that professional network. And mind you, this is um, me who, like I previously mentioned, landed 2 years and 21 days ago with zero connections in Australia, like
Hmm.
literally knew nobody when we got here. And then I guess through these opportunities or through these platforms, there were opportunities to connect with people. And Park, like you pointed out, we did end up creating the PhD group for the NSMAC, and then that's grown and that's become a network in itself. The second aspect would be around, or strategy would be around leveraging social media. So for me, it's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my jam. I think it's been an invaluable platform to connect with colleagues, mentors, potential collaborators, and looking at engaging with actively engaging with content and also sharing my insights. And the last point that I'd like to add there, in this digital world we live in, is really the importance of face-to-face interactions. So where it's possible, I take an effort to meet people, whether that's even as simple as knocking on someone's door, and if they're there, just popping in saying hello. I have found that to be so crucial. Those knock on the doors and hellos, of course, with their permission, to building up professional networks. And in a conference, that could look like actually engaging with people on a one-to-one basis. So yeah, those would be my key strategies around developing a professional network
All
as a
right.
PhD
All
student.
right. So obviously face to face can build more trust comparing to, other things and you have other chats. So you did touch on the conference a bit. Now, what is your approach or strategy when you go to a conference or when you go to like industry network session to build a good connection, like a meaningful connection? Because I have seen you at least two times at the ANSMAC conference as a uh, volunteer as well. Like you do a few volunteer, and I would assume that you might be going to the ANSMAC this year as well if there is an opportunity.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So what is your strategy in building a network at the conference?
Great. I should start off by saying I actually hated the word networking because I viewed networking as very transactional. And in my head, networking was when somebody wanted to sell you something or somebody wanted to buy something from you. That's how I viewed networking. But over time, I've really come to appreciate the immense value that it helps build in terms of meaningful connections. So my approach to networking, and this has always been the case, and I believe it will always be the case, my approach to networking is to prioritize genuine and meaningful connections as the ultimate end goal rather than viewing these connections to achieve other ulterior motives. So the end goal for me in any form of a conference or a networking event is to build meaningful connections. And if I have built some of those connections, that's it. There doesn't have to be something coming after that. Now, specifically talking about how do I approach networking events and conferences. Now, keeping this frame of reference in mind, which is where it's the connection that matters more than what happens from those connections. I do prior research and I intentionally look up at the speaker list, at the attendee list. So when it was the ANSMAC doctoral colloquium, I looked at the other speakers. I found people who I thought would be of interest to me in terms of the research area. And this really helps me to be more well informed when I go into the event. So I know who I want to speak to. I might even do like a pre-event reach out. If I'm really wanting to connect with them, I might drop them a message on LinkedIn or an email before the event. And of course, if there is a two-way agreement, we agree to meet at the event again. And the key point being, like I mentioned, it's approaching it's approaching networking with the mindset of uh, giving or contributing rather than wanting and making it transactional. And the last point I should add here is um, don't assume the worst, assume the best. Most people, I can tell you this from the conferences I've attended so far, most academics, most PhD peers, 99.9% of them are nice. They will not bite you if you walk up to them and have a conversation. So I think it's important to realize that not every interaction might lead to a tangible or intangible outcome, and that's okay. And not everyone's out there to get you. They're busy, they're doing their own thing. I think if we can get over that fear of rejection, uh, creating meaningful connections in networking events and conferences is something that is pleasantly surprising and can really help enrich your experiences in
Mm,
such
okay.
conferences.
Those are some of the good suggestion and also the insight that you have shared. I think that's
Thank you.
interesting that can I explore more because you have been to say Dr. Colloquium where it's specifically for doctor student and also like a big main conferences at a few places. Are there differences in terms of the Dr. Colloquium and also main conference that you have been to and the benefit of it?
Right. Um, it's important to be self-aware. And if I can answer that from a cultural perspective, I come from a high power distance index culture. So very often, without me realizing or not, I begin to fall in that paradigm, so as to speak. So I would view a PhD peer as someone that's more approachable and I can easily connect with. But say Professor so and so from such and such university walks past in an event, like maybe not. And that goes back to the point that I said. It's a constant effort to get over the fear of rejection. It's okay to walk up. Like I said, 99.9% of the people I've walked up to have responded back with positive responses. And maybe there are a few who didn't want to have a chat, and it's completely fine. So I think once we get over that initial hump, so as to speak, it for me is in the same plane. It's the same level playing field where a PhD, a doctoral colloquium, or a main event is the same. That being said, prior research helps. So if you walk up to, say, in the main event or a larger format where you've got academics mixed with PhD students, you want to know who you're speaking to and why. And again, the intention is clear. It's about creating and connecting with people. And that's also where I would say simple things, a warm smile, a firm handshake, a genuine conversation can leave lasting impressions, whether that's a PhD student that you're speaking to or a well-established academic. And you never know what comes out of those connections, but the connection is the end goal in that particular event.
Yeah, I think that is very good, especially in terms of suggestion of do a research beforehand of like who will be the speaker, who will be there as a participant, and like who would you like to build a relationship with in terms of not a purpose of wanting to take something from them, but a purpose of like maybe you can contribute, you can give back and all that. So
Yeah.
even myself,
And
if you have
sorry,
been to,
Buck, if I can add just one more
sure,
point
please.
there. I just remember this. Remembering names.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's research backing this up, but remembering names, I think, is one of the best skill sets you can have. If you can remember people's names, and the next time you run into them, you remember them by their name and call them out by their name. I think that goes a long way in creating connections. And I've been, for whatever reason, blessed with the ability to remember names. I typically remember people's full names, first name and last name. And when I'm bored, sometimes once in a while, randomly, I will play this game in my head. I'll think of a person's first name and try to remember their last name.
Hmm.
But I just wanted to add
That's a
that
very
point
good
that remembering
strategy.
names is key. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I cut you off. Please go
No
ahead.
problem. Now you have touched in terms of you have a high level of power distance based on the culture and all that you have mentioned. So if you touch about culture, right now you're doing some work in Australia, you have been to New Zealand and a few other countries. Do you find challenging or difficult, or do you find good in terms of have a different background and culture when you are here as a PhD candidate?
Right. And just to give you a little bit of background to my cultural uh, backstory, I've lived and worked and studied in both India, in Mumbai, and in Dubai. I've traveled to multiple countries in Europe and in the Middle East. I've also done some Bible discipleship schools in Kenya, in addition to all of the other travels that I've done. So, uh, in response to your question, I think my my diverse cultural experiences gives me a unique perspective to look at things. I'm ever so often able to put myself in another person's shoe from a culture perspective and pick on cues on why something's being said. It also helps with just communication sometimes across cultures, so as to speak. And I should add one practical um, outworking of this varied cultural background is I can tell you some really, really good stories. And good stories find their way into my teaching. So often in my classroom, I'll be talking about an example in Dubai or in India or in Kenya or one of the countries that I visited in Europe, say the UK or Greece or so on and so forth. That does find its way in. And on the flip side, with the networking and the connecting as well, when you're meeting people, stories help. And I'm sitting on a rich repertoire of stories based on all of these cultural experiences that I've had, and that's worked to my advantage for sure.
Yes, yes, that's very good. And people can remember and understand story better than just the plain fact and numbers as well. And believe it or not, when apply for job criteria, job promotion, internal, external, they're all after some story with it as well, apart from the fact and then the story and all that. So that can be learned on, another session. Now, my last question is that if you again, this is like some type of like a reflection. So uh to yourself, do you think what are some of the aspects that you have done so well that lead you to where you are today in terms of the perception of how people view you?
Right. I think reflecting on my journey, and we've touched upon this before. I believe I am where I am today because I have a strong foundation that's rooted in some fundamental values and beginning with my faith. So my faith is at the heart of that foundation, and that shapes my values around love, around integrity, around purpose. And these values in turn help inform my priorities. It helps me build my family life, my work life, connecting or cultivating meaningful connections. All of that stems from those core values of love, of integrity, and of purpose. And also outside of that, I believe from that base, because I'm a driven individual, I'm seeking for opportunities for growth, for impact, and whether that's within research or within teaching. And to sum it all up, I believe it's staying true to my core values and leveraging the support that I have with my family, with my supervisors, with my community, both professionally and personally, has really propelled me forward, has kept me going. This is what's guided my past achievements, and I believe that's what's going to shape my future aspirations as well.
Excellent, and thank you very much for your insight and story sharing today. So, this is Career Path Building and Identity as a PhD candidate with Sam Freeby from University of Wollongong. Thank you so much, Sam, for your time.
Thank you, Park. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.